Hello and welcome back to the official Scottish Rugby podcast. On the show this week, Chief Operating Officer Dominic McKay answers your questions, and we hear from Keith Mcleod, the President of Harris Rugby Club. Well, joining us once again on the podcast is our Chief Operating Officer, Dominic McKay. Dom, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you, Jamie. I hope you're keeping well.
Yeah, all good here, thanks. All good here. Now, Al and I have got some questions we're going to ask you, but we thought before we ask our questions, we've got lots of questions from our great supporters as well. So if you don't mind, we're just going to jump in with those straight away. So the first question that came up, Dom, when we told them that you were going to be on the podcast was actually around the Lions. Have you got any ticket details around that match prior to the season 2021?
Great question. At the moment, the Lions is still a to be confirmed. I think, as I mentioned before, that we were invited to put a bid forward to host the Lions potentially before they head off to South Africa. We put a really great bid together, creating a sort of a festival weekend at Murrayfield, and that's been really well received by the board of the Lions. But at the moment, given COVID and the challenges we're all facing, nothing's been finalised or agreed. So I'm afraid there are no ticket details on that. But should we secure the event, our Scotland supporters will be the first to know.
Well, a question we've had in from our supporters around a season ticket, season pass, I assume from a Scotland point of view, and asking when the season starts up again, will that be held? They have 3 seats and they don't want to lose those particular seats.
Well, we went out last week just to all our season pass holders just to confirm that we're delaying effectively going on sale and taking payments for the season pass for the season ahead because of the uncertainty with COVID. And one of the challenges we're also juggling with, of course, is the idea of physical distancing. So physical distancing in a stadium is really, really challenging. So at the current sort of 2 metre radius, it would mean that we would be less than 10,000 could get into our stadium, significantly less than 10,000 could get into Murrayfield. If that changes, then it perhaps improves things. But the way in which you spread groups out and around the stadium would need to be completely reconfigured to ensure that we practice that sort of physical distancing. So it's a really challenging sort of patchwork quilt that we need to look at in terms of our supporters who will be allowed back into Murrayfield. So at the moment, there's lots of thought going into that. I see that there's changes potentially coming in the sort of days and weeks in respect of physical distancing. So as soon as we get more updates on that, we'll then overlay that onto our stadium map and then share that with our supporters. But it's a very much a moving feast at the moment.
Tom, another question that we get asked quite a lot at the moment is around the women's game. Can you give us a little bit of an update around the women's game and maybe any other rep fixtures taking place?
It's very, very challenging, clearly. I happen to sit on the board of Rugby Europe, which is a sort of governing body for European rugby. It looks at all the competitions across Europe for 7s and 18s and 20s, all the way up to the national teams other than the sort of Six Nations. And every single country has been clearly affected by COVID, which means every tournament has been affected. So at the moment there's a lot of challenge in terms of planning for any of those competitions to resume. There's a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes, both in Europe but also in Scotland with our high performance teams and our colleagues in the women's game. The women's game was one of the things that I was asked about before, is a very important part of our sport. It's seen some great growth in recent years and we're very proud of that success and we want that success to continue. So it remains an area which we will want to protect and support as best we possibly can in the years ahead. And the best way to protect and support is making sure there's good competitions for our teams to play in. So there'll be a lot of hard work continuing to win to try and get whatever competitions we can back up and running as quickly as we can. But it's a real challenge because of the nature of the teams and the areas that we play in.
Dom, you've touched on it there, but the next question that came in was around the global season and how the global season potentially affects the national team and the pro teams as well as a result.
The global season, there's lots of discussion taking place and has been for a while on what a global season might look like, trying to get a better alignment between the professional game calendar and the international calendar. And those discussions are ongoing just now. I guess from our point of view, maybe from a supporter's perspective, what you want to try and create is the best calendar that creates the best international windows and the best professional windows, and that there's the best opportunity for supporters to watch those games and not feel that they're missing out in some games. At the moment, sometimes the Pro 14 runs across the international window and that's probably not ideal. It's just the nature of the sport at the moment. But going forward, it'd be nice to have a clearer delineation between the professional game and the international game for the players, of course, as well, but also for the supporters. So the global season is a work in progress just now, but it needs to be done in terms of changes need to be done with supporters in mind, and that's certainly what's driving our thinking in Scotland.
Well, you mentioned we mentioned the pro teams there. Great to get a Pro 14 announcement out last week, and a wee bit of light at the end of the tunnel, obviously done in the correct manner. But how important was it to get a plan in place to be able to communicate that out to supporters and to the rugby public?
It was really important to confirm that we sort of got a date to aim at for the players and the coaches and the fans of the 22nd of August. And the plan is, as you know, to play sort of 4 rounds with 2 derby rounds initially, and then a semi-final and a final. And it's fantastic to have something to aim at. And notwithstanding, things can change between now and then. But what that's meant is that the players across the Pro 14 can get back into some degree of training and then work towards a start date. And I think that's a real positive shot in the arm, not just for professional game. And naturally, the professional game takes a lot of the headlines at the moment. But it's fantastic for the whole game because it shows that there's beginning some green shoots for recovery. And I think over the coming weeks, we'll hopefully see some more of that. I'm definitely an optimist, as you know, and I'm seeing some positive signs on the horizon, notwithstanding how challenging a time it is.
Yeah, Al mentioned that it's great that the Pro 14 announcement came out and that rugby can return in August. I wanted to go back to Scotland for a second, Dom. Scotland season pass is a huge part now of any Scotland fan and hugely popular. Have you got any update around them and when maybe fans can expect more information around that?
Well, we've been really pleased actually with the Scotland season pass. When we launched it a few years ago, we weren't quite sure how it would be received. We've now got around 25,000 Scotland season pass holders, which is incredible. It's a massive thank you to the supporters that continue to back the team in such enormous numbers. But what we've got at the moment is, I guess, a lack of clarity in some respects in terms of what games we're going to have in the autumn and what the kick-off times might be. Of course, we're due to play Argentina, Japan and New Zealand. And at the moment, that is still the plan. But of course, we've still got to think about plan Bs. So we're having to think about what other options we might have to give some consideration to. That might be, it could be playing teams from the UK. It could be playing sort of Six Nations teams over that window. That's up in the air, but it's very much a plan B. So until we've got some certainty, we didn't want to go on formal sale with the season pass. So I think we communicated last week to all of our season pass holders saying we're delaying the payment run for a period of time until we've got a bit more certainty. So as soon as we've got some certainty, we'll go back and let our supporters know. And that was really important to us, that we didn't want to take anyone for granted. We wanted to make sure that our supporters got the best information as early as we possibly could give it to them. And even when we don't have information, we share the fact of the things that we're thinking about. Part of the reason for coming on today and sort of giving a bit of an update.
And just on that, my second question then would be, Dom, is when do you then see fans allowed back in to BT Murrayfield?
Well, at the moment, as maybe I mentioned earlier on, it's really hard because of physical distancing for obvious medical reasons. But we're working with the government just now to try and see if there's ways that we can maybe offer some test events at some point with other sports to try and put some mitigation in place to say this is how we might behave as a sports organisation. And as a result of that, perhaps that gives an opportunity for the government to think about sport resuming, even in a small way, with supporters in the coming months. But at the moment, we would envisage, currently based on the government restrictions, very limited attendance this year, actually. And if we can make some improvements in that, we'll work really hard to try and achieve that. But at the moment, physical distancing in a stadium of 67,000 people would mean we'd be restricted to well under 10,000, which is very tough.
Dominic, you mentioned speaking to the government there. I know there's been fantastic dialogue over the last few months, and we've had Jason Leach on this podcast on a number of occasions, updating us and our supporters as well. But how important has that been, the dialogue's been there as far as planning, I suppose, what is an uncertain future, but putting the best steps in place?
Well, we've got a really good relationship with the Scottish Government, and we have had for many years. And at the moment, it's probably been as important now as at any point in our history to have a good symbiotic relationship with the government. So we speak to them almost on a daily basis across multiple different topics. As a governing body, we've got responsibility for, of course, the grassroots, and that's a vital area for us to try and get some clarity on and to share that with our clubs. and it's been a bit frustrating, actually, that we've not been able to go into too much detail on guidance for clubs, but naturally that's because the government are yet in a place to give us that sort of information. We have made some progress with the elite sport, Glasgow and Edinburgh resuming training this week, which has been really pleasing, and we're working towards those behind closed doors games on the 22nd of August for the Pro 14 restarting. But we've also, we're a massive contributor to the economy. So last year, Scottish Rugby and Murrayfield and Scotland contributed around £152 million to the Scottish economy. So as a income generator for Scotland PLC, we've got a massive role to play. So we talk to the government around those sort of areas. And we're also a large event organisation, whether that's putting on big events like the Six Nations or rock concerts like the Rolling Stones. We've got a role to play on the whole events industry restarting as well. So our conversations with the government are multifaceted and very active at the moment, and they need to be for very good reasons. But our thinking is that if we go to government with some suggestions and some solutions, that'll be better received than just highlighting the challenges that we face. Everyone knows our challenge. We want to offer some solutions to get the country restarted.
And could that plan potentially include, if we are restricted with the number of fans we could put into BT Murrayfield or Scots, and if that gets back up and running from a Glasgow point of view, other opportunities for supporters to watch games, even if it's not within the stadiums?
Definitely. I mean, I think one of the things that I've been really proud of our team is that we're innovating, and we have done a lot of great innovation over the last number of years, and that's created much of the success and the foundations of a solid organisation that we're able to sort of build on. And some of the innovations that the team are coming up with right at the moment during COVID has been brilliant. So, some of the ideas are like drive-ins, where you can go to an area and watch a game on a big screen. So at the moment, the guys that put on historically Tea in the Park are taking over a big place at the West End of Edinburgh, at the Royal Showgrounds, to have a drive-in. And that was predominantly about music, but we're having a chat to them about, could that be for rugby as well? Would it be worthwhile, Edinburgh supporters, for example, heading down to watch the games on a big screen, sitting outside the cars, perhaps having a light refreshment and enjoying a game, and perhaps something similar could be done in Glasgow. So small things like that that create the idea of supporters being engaged with their team is something we're really keen on. And we're looking around the world. So we're looking down south, we're looking over in Europe, we're looking into the States in terms of other ideas that we can try and create experiences without you actually being in the stadium. Now, nothing beats being in Scotstoun, nothing beats being at Murrayfield, absolutely, and that's our focus. But whilst we can't maybe access that in the numbers that we want, how do we try and create some fun, some experience, either at home or in other areas that we can do some activities? So I think the team are working pretty hard on that. So I would suggest to supporters just to watch this space, because there could be some exciting news coming out in that in the coming weeks and months.
Don, part of the communication that's gone out recently has been the update on season ticket holders for both Glasgow Warriors and for Edinburgh Rugby. Can you give us some insight into what we've put out and some of the feedback we've been getting back?
Yeah, so obviously quite an uncertain time for Glasgow Warriors and even Edinburgh Rugby season ticket holders, given that the Pro 14 had paused just after halfway through the season, so that the number of games that were yet to be delivered. And then when the Pro 14 announced that they were going to resume, ideally on the 22nd of August for those final games, those two derby games and the semi-final and final, it suddenly meant that we needed to find a way of refunding and offering support back to those season ticket holders. So we did that last week, and Doug and Nathan shared that information with all the supporters. And I suppose that the really pleasing thing that we picked up is that one of the options that was available to supporters was to either roll forward with credit or to allow the money to stay with the club for the club's benefit. And a number of supporters, I think over 50% of supporters already, have come back to say they'd actually like to leave their funds with the club for the club's benefit. And that's, I think, testament to our supporters who've been magnificent. It's a tough time for everyone right now, but that's an indication of their love for Edinburgh, their love for Glasgow. So I guess we've all got a role to play in responding to that when we can in the season ahead. So hopefully this week there should be some good news coming out for Glasgow and for Edinburgh around some player signings, which hopefully will be well received.
Dom, I know there was some communication out last week to the clubs based on phase 2 that the government announced. As far as rolling out the next phases from a Scottish rugby point of view, how hopeful are you that domestic rugby will get a clearer picture in the next few weeks?
Yeah, so we've been communicating with the clubs, our 230 plus local rugby clubs, every single week over the last 9 weeks to try and share with them the most up-to-date information that we possibly can, particularly in respect of our threat management group, which is our group that looks after the challenge that we're facing in COVID. We shared some information on phase 2 as government moved into phase 2 of their roadmap, that talked about how clubs can behave in that sort of phase 2 environment. We actually hoped to be able to roll out the whole sort of roadmap sort of with the various gates linked to the government's further phasing. We just weren't able to do that yet, so the government are still looking at our plan and trying to give us some feedback on that, and we'll get that feedback this week. So I would imagine Sheila and her team will be able to share some thoughts around the more detail that the clubs need in respect to that roadmap in the coming week or two. But we've been very pleased that we were able to share some updates last week on the Club Hardship Fund. I think over 82 clubs received almost £400,000 from Scottish Rugby in respect to the Club Hardship Fund. And Sheila's also mentioned the fact that we'll try and do something if we can in terms of restarting, some sort of restarting fund. So whilst it's very, very challenging for clubs, we absolutely we hear that, and we want to try and support them as best we possibly can, because they are the lifeblood of our whole sport, and the elite end can't function without a thriving club game.
Dom, in some ways it is simpler to get the elite level of the game back functioning because of the numbers and I suppose the direct control that we have at Scottish Rugby. And we saw the players returning to a biohub at BT Murrayfield to be able to go through their own training schedules this week. How quickly do you think we might see the same happening over at Scotstoun?
Well, it was really pleasing actually. It's a real shot in the arm actually to see our players getting invited back into voluntary fitness this week to do some, pre-training before their full training starts later in July. And that's actually great for the whole of Scottish sport to see our athletes, whether it's footballers or rugby players, back involved playing the sport they love, getting ready to play at an elite level. Has been a really welcome sight this past few days. And it's a massive thank yous to everybody that's involved around the operations at BT Murrayfield and the high performance that have created an environment, that sort of bubble that you described, that they can come in a safe and secure place to get involved with their fitness, whether that's the outdoor gym or the pitches that have been maintained so fantastically by the facilities team. We've got a great environment for the guys to get fit and to get healthy. So excited about that. The second part is around Scotstoun. At the moment, what we've said to government is that we want to have a secure environment, and what they've asked us to do is to make that a Murrayfield. So the bubble in Murrayfield will cater for Glasgow and for Edinburgh. As the players begin to work their way through their phasing. We'll have a look, and we are having a look at Scotstoun. We'd love to get Scotstoun back up and running as quickly as we possibly can. Clearly, it's not our site. It's owned by the City Council and Glasgow Life. So we're in dialogue with them just now to see if we can possibly get it available later in July, August, so the players can get back into doing some semblance of training there. But that's the key thing, as I've spoken about before, is collaboration. And that's another example of collaboration that needs to happen, ourselves, the city of Glasgow, working together to try and get part of that facility open for the players. Because, eventually I'm quite sure that the Edinburgh team will want to have a bit more space to breathe at Murrayfield, and the Glasgow team will want to have their own home back. So we want to work towards that, but we need to do that in a respectful way.
Well, one other significant project that's been going on at BT Murrayfield and has been affected over the last few months is a certain stadium on the back pitches. Can you give us an update, potentially more so to Edinburgh fans, but to everybody, on how the stadium build is coming along?
Well, obviously the stadium build had to stop as a result of COVID and the government restrictions, quite rightly. Those restrictions are beginning to lift now, so it's been very pleasing to press the restart button on that particular project. So we've got some of the team in from our contractors working this week, and that will begin to build over the coming weeks and months. We're sort of almost halfway through the build when we had to pause it, so it'll be lovely to see the next half coming to life. The 4 lighting towers are up, 2.5 stands are up. So over the coming weeks and months, we'll really see that new stadium take shape. And I'm really proud about that. I think the whole organisation should be really proud about that when we're able to get it up and finished. It'll be a shot in the arm, of course, for Edinburgh Rugby, and it'll be their new home. And I'm really pleased that we can deliver that for them and for their supporters. But also, it's a great asset for the whole of Scottish rugby, and it can be used by the whole of Scottish rugby. It'll have a synthetic pitch. So, in fact, as a result of COVID, there may be an opportunity for that facility to be used by many rugby clubs in the wider Edinburgh area over the coming months as they get restarted as well. So if we've got a quality facility that's available, then we want to utilise it as much as we possibly can. So I'll be really pleased when that gets concluded, and we're hoping to conclude it around October time. So we've got quite a tight schedule, but we'll work really hard, and the team are going to work really hard at Edinburgh Rugby to try and get it delivered as early as we possibly can.
And Dom, to use one of your own quotes, BT Murfield is always open for business, and there's been some talk around football coming to BT Murfield, whether that's Hearts, Hibs or Hales. Can you give us any update around maybe other sports coming in, or any talks going on around other sports using our stadium?
After we bid for Hampden, I promised myself I'd never get involved with football ever again. But I guess during COVID, one needs to think very collaboratively, and we threw open the doors as an offer to Hearts and to Hibs. Should they wish or they need to utilise the facility, they're very welcome to use it. So those discussions are ongoing just now, and people are evaluating what's practical and what's possible for them. It goes without saying that socially distancing, or physically distancing, I think as the government like to refer to it, is easier to do in a large stadium than a smaller stadium, Tynecastle or Easter Road. So if the restrictions continue, and we do expect them to continue for some considerable time, then it's possible that Hibs or Hearts could potentially benefit from being spread out in a large stadium. And we're happy to try and make that available to them. Because, it's important for the whole of sport to restart. We've spoken about it before, and it's worth just underlining. I think for the Scottish psyche and for mental health and well-being, sport's got a really important role to play. So if we can help football and we can get rugby restarted, it can only be good for everybody, I think, that's interested in sport, and particularly young people. I think young people just now need a bit of a shot in the arm, and I think sport can give them that in a positive way. And you can see that with football starting down in England. Notwithstanding, it looks a bit weird in empty stadiums. It's just lovely seeing sport starting again, and we want to be the vanguard of that, hence the reason for offering Murrayfield up.
Scottish rugby, like all sports, Dom, is built on strong partnerships. How pleased have you been to work closely with Scottish Rugby's ongoing partners on the road back to rugby? Our
partners have been magnificent, genuinely magnificent. We have got 3 income streams in the main for Scottish Rugby. Ticket income, about 500,000 people came through our turnstiles last year. Broadcast income, where television deals with people like BT, and Sky and BBC. And then thirdly, our sponsors, critically our sponsors. And that's sponsors at Scotland level, and it's also sponsors at Glasgow level and Edinburgh Rugby level. And they have been absolutely magnificent, because those sponsors, those brands, those companies are really hurting just now, of course, because of the COVID situation. But what we've tried to do, and our sponsor teams at Glasgow, Edinburgh, Scotland have worked really closely with them to keep them updated on what our business is looking like, what our plans are going forward, how we're trying to bring them some value and some content and some activities, and they've responded really, really well. And I guess for the long-term health of the sport, it's so important that our sponsors stand by us and that we work together with our sponsors, because we want to restart rugby as quickly as we possibly can. We want to restart rugby at all levels, from the international level all the way down to the mini level, and we can't do that on our own. And our sponsors are absolutely vital and will continue to be vital. It's going to be a tough environment. We know economically it's going to be a tough environment over the coming months and potentially years. So it's for us as Scottish Rugby to work really hard with them. But I just cannot emphasise enough how wonderful they've been. So long may that continue, and it's a huge thanks to them, along with the supporters, for, I guess, continuing to support the organisation.
Dominic, brilliant to get you back on the podcast and give our fans an update on the current situation. So thanks again for your time, and we'll speak to you soon. Well, joining us on the podcast now is Keith Mcleod, who is the president of Harris Rugby Football Club. Keith, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hi. I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No, very, very good to have you on the podcast. Now, we know how old you are. You're the president of a rugby club. Just tell everybody how old you are to be president of a rugby club.
I'm 28 years of age.
Which is remarkable. what a fascinating journey you've been on to get to where you are now. If we just go back to the very beginning kind of your rugby journey, when did you start playing rugby?
I started playing rugby January of 2019. Yeah, just as completely unaware of the game. I've got a bit of a background in sport. I come from a kind of dance, kayaking sort of mashup. Yeah. And worked in sport for 5-6 years. So, relatively aware of the game, but no way a player in any shape or fashion.
Who did you initially play rugby for? So who was your first team?
The Caledonian Thebans, based in Edinburgh.
What made you join? What made you suddenly take up the game?
I think it was a friend of mine who had said that the Thebans were doing their kind of recruitment boot camp. So they would set up this event for anyone who had never played rugby before, just to give them that introduction into the game. So that was, January 2019. Went along, just thought it'd be of interest. It was local to where I was staying at the time, so that obviously helps quite a lot. And I was just interested as well because it was advertised very much as an LGBT plus inclusive event. Just interested in that aim of you've never ever played before, come along and give it a try. At the event, the committee had set up for actually a coach from either a local club or from the SRU to come along and coach us. So it was a 12-week free program where we were coached. I can't remember his last name. He was called Ant, and he was a beautiful man. Which again, very much kept us all engaged.
That was a Scottish rugby coach.
I think so, yeah.
I don't think who that is. We'll have to find that out. Saying you're giving him a compliment as well. We'll need to find out who that is.
Give him a shout out on the podcast.
That was the setup. And as I say, it was very much, you've never ever played before. Some of the guys, had never even really watched much rugby. So the rules, the passing the ball backwards, it was completely alien. So, it was nice to kind of just be introduced to the sport and not have no fear of judgment whatsoever in making mistakes. So it was unique, and it was really, really good.
So where's your playing career gone since then? Still actively playing as well as the presidency of Harris?
Continued to be involved with the Thebans and help them with their recruitment. Across summer, just had the best time with the club. It's actually one of the best times in my life, probably, meeting those guys and making friends that are still my best kind of guy friends to date.
You mentioned making the best friends you have. I think every single one of us on here and anybody that plays the game can relate to that. What do you think it is in rugby that helps to create those bonds? For me, I suppose the welcoming atmosphere of the Thebans was truly the entry into our friendships, and the boot camp as well, because there was only a certain amount of us. It was almost, like going traveling with a group of people who you've never met, and then by the end of it, you absolutely love one another. So we had really bonded over that period of time, training together and learning the game, making mistakes together. And I think all of that combined truly brought us together and made us all so close, which is why we still keep in touch and we're still chatting with one another. But the game itself, rugby, is just one of those, whether you're interested or not, you meet just such fabulous people. Everyone wants to get along and everyone wants to chat. It's a really, really unique space, a really unique environment to be part of. Rach, you can relate to that, can you? You go through, you see each other at your best and you see each other at your worst, but whatever it is, you do it together, don't you? And it does build those bonds.
Yeah, we as a women's team, we've been through some pretty big highs and very big lows. So I think, going through those emotions together, and similar, I guess, with you guys learning the game, the highs and lows of that, definitely pull you together and kind of bring you closer for sure.
You mentioned earlier on that you were a dancer, you got a dancing background. So what was your position? Because I can imagine you maybe being a back then with the quick feet, a good sidestep. What position were you?
Yeah, I was inside centre for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now primarily on the wing. But yes, I suppose that dancer background kind of helped me, as you say, with a bit of agility,
Mm-hmm.
Throwing in some moves that perhaps were not seen as typical rugby moves, but still got the ball. And actually, yeah, that dancer experience actually for me, again, helped with my confidence in joining in with the guys,
Mm-hmm.
It's just that outward expressive, I want to be seen attitude that a lot of us theatrics live for. So yeah, but certainly playing, that athleticism and moving left and right was fabulous.
Me and Al have that in abundance as well. Exactly how you describe us two as players.
Yeah. By definition, the Thebans, it's inclusive at its core. And that's, as I say, that's part of the reason the existence for the club. But what about your view on rugby wider than that, and how do you try and push that inclusivity into what you're doing at Harris?
Rugby on a larger scale, I see as being an inclusive environment at heart, but perhaps isn't always pictured that way. It's not always perceived as inclusive, but certainly at a club level, I would say that we are pushing inclusivity, but perhaps just not portraying it in the kind of blunt way that it needs to be to make the point clear that clubs are inclusive. It is a safe environment.
Give us, you're president of Harris Rugby Club. What are you going to do?
There's loads of different opportunities. One, for me, it's being an ally to anyone who, one, is of the LGBT community, but two, has never played the sport before in their life. I think there's almost an environment of you try out a new sport and you're dropped in the deep end and, more often than not, drown, for lack of a better phrase. We sometimes need those armbands to get us started and to keep us engaged. Moving forward with Harris is a case of, being that one person, that ally to educate and encourage the inclusive culture that the club already has. It's, it is there. It's just, it needs to be pushed out across Dundee, and for us to put ourselves in the spaces that the LGBT community, or indeed any minority group that might be interested in taking up the sport, it's putting ourselves in that space to say, look, we want you to come and try and love the sport as much as we do. So feel comfortable, feel safe.
You've obviously progressed quite quickly, so you've only been at Harris for about a year, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you've already progressed to being president. How's that kind of process come about?
It's been a fast progression to presidency, I suppose. The committee last year very kindly brought me on as a kind of co-opted member to do some promotion, look after their social media accounts, look at those kind of bigger comms messages of inclusion, diversity, and make sure that we start to send out those messages on our outward-facing platforms, which we did. I think I did an okay job. Sometimes dropped the ball, literally a couple of times. But yeah, that was really the beginning of getting involved in the committee side of things. And when election season was on the horizon, I kind of just saw the top and thought, I'm going for that. We'll get there one day. Why not? Let's just put our name forward for it now, which the rest of the committee were hugely for and supportive. It's a young club, and it's had its ups and downs in the past, and I think they saw that I could bring my background in sports development and events and inclusivity, and really take the club hopefully to that next stage, whatever that may be.
And Keith, one thing that Scottish Rugby and you're aware of is the Bingham Cup. In 2024. Can you just talk more about, for my listeners, what the Bingham Cup is and what you're doing to push that bid?
The Bingham Cup is a gay rugby union tournament. It's on the world stage. It's named after Mark Bingham, who died on board United Airlines Flight 93 when it crashed during the September 11, 2001 attacks. It's a tragic event which Mark, who was a avid rugby player, sadly died on board. But as a gay man and as a rugby player, he was instrumental in developing rugby and challenging stereotypes and perceptions of the game in the States. And the Bingham Cup is very much held in his honour. I've never been, but from images and videos, it looks fabulous, and I'm very keen to go to experience the entire event. The Thebans, we were looking to bid to host the Cup for 2022. However, just due to the current pandemic, the competition this year, which was due to be held in Canada, has been postponed to 2022, and we'll see if the club are still keen to bid for it in 2024. They're certainly looking to fundraise to send a team across to represent Scotland, and we'll hopefully see them in Canada in 2022. If not, certainly in Birmingham for the Union Cup in 2021, which is next year.
Keith Mcleod, president of Harris Rugby Club. Brilliant to get you on the podcast, and we all wish you the very best for the season ahead. That's all from us this week on the official Scottish Rugby podcast. But as always, we will be back next week with more exclusive content.